The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched high above like a cathedral made of light and metal. Thousands of seats circled the central floor where ambassadors from hundreds of worlds gathered to decide the fate of entire civilizations. Today, the chamber buzzed with an energy that felt different, heavier, more dangerous. Ambassador Taemin stood in the human delegation area, his dark suit perfectly pressed, his hands clasped behind his back. Next to him, Jiwoo checked her datapad one last time, her military uniform crisp and formal. On his other side, Hana adjusted her translation device, though she barely needed it anymore after 10 years of diplomatic service. The three of them had known this day was coming. The signs had been clear for months. Small insults that grew larger, requests that became demands, respect that turned to contempt. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for 50 years, and in that time they had worked harder than any other species to prove themselves worthy. They had shared their technology freely. They had sent their best minds to help solve problems across the galaxy. They had asked for nothing except to be treated as equals. But equality was not what the Council wanted to give them. Chancellor Drexelon rose from his elevated throne at the center of the chamber. He was a Veltorian, tall and broad, with skin that shimmered like oil on water. His species had founded the Council 3,000 years ago, and they never let anyone forget it. He looked down at the human delegation with something that might have been pity, or might have been contempt. With Veltorians, it was hard to tell the difference. Ambassador Taemin, Drexelon said, his voice amplified through the chamber. "We have called this session to address the human question once and for all." Taemin said nothing. He simply looked up at the Chancellor and waited. "Humanity has been a member of this council for 5 decades. Drexelon continued. "In that time, you have contributed much. We acknowledge this. However, the Council has determined that certain adjustments must be made to ensure galactic stability and proper order." Around the chamber, representatives from other species nodded. The Krell clicked their mandibles in agreement. The Aquarians rippled their tentacles. The crystalline consortium chimed softly. They had all decided this together, Taemin realized. This was not a debate. This was a sentence. Representative Vixtar of the Krell stood next. His insect-like body gleamed under the chamber lights. "Humanity will surrender voting rights on all military matters," he announced. "Your species is too young, too aggressive. You do not understand the delicate balance of power that maintains peace." Taemin felt Jiwoo tense beside him. She was a soldier, and she knew what humanity's military had done. They had defended Council worlds from pirates. They had patrolled dangerous sectors that other species feared. They had lost thousands of lives protecting aliens who now called them too aggressive. The Aquarian delegate spoke next, her voice like water flowing over stones. "Humanity will also provide full access to your shipbuilding facilities and techniques. Your vessels are crude but effective. We require them for study and replication. Additionally," said the representative from the Crystalline Consortium, "Earth's biosphere will be opened for scientific examination. Your world's diversity is unique and must be cataloged by proper authorities." One by one, they added their demands. 3 colony worlds to be surrendered, human genetic samples to be provided for research, Earth's education system to be reviewed and corrected, human cultural practices to be evaluated for civilization protocols. On and on, each demand cutting deeper than the last. Hana kept her face neutral, but Taemin saw her jaw tighten. She had spent years building relationships with these species, learning their languages and customs, helping them understand humanity, and now they reduced everything to a list of things they wanted to take. Finally, Drexelon stood again. "These terms are not negotiable. They are the Council's judgment. Humanity has been useful, but you have not yet earned true membership. Consider this a probationary adjustment. In perhaps another century, we may revisit your status." The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to Taemin. They expected him to argue, to beg, to negotiate. They expected anger or fear or submission. Humans were emotional, after all. Everyone knew that. Taemin looked at Jiwoo. She gave a slight nod. He looked at Hana. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them and nodded as well. They had discussed this possibility many times. They had hoped it would not come to this, but they had prepared for it anyway. Taemin stepped forward to the speaker's circle. The chamber's acoustics would carry his voice to every corner, to every species, to every world watching this transmission across the galaxy. "No," he said simply. Drexelon blinked. Excuse me? No, Taman repeated. We decline your terms. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council and all associated treaties, agreements, and obligations. For 3 full seconds, the chamber was completely silent. Then the laughter started. It began with Vixtar, his mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement. Then the Aquarians rippled with laughter that sounded like rain. The crystalline consortium chimed in mockery. Soon the entire chamber echoed with the sound of hundreds of species laughing at the human delegation. Drexelon smiled, showing teeth. Ambassador, you misunderstand. You cannot simply leave. Humanity needs the Council. You need our protection, our trade routes, our technology. Without us, you will collapse within a year. You will come crawling back, begging for whatever terms we offer. Taman said nothing. He simply turned, walked back to Jiwoo and Hana, and gestured toward the exit. You are making a mistake, Vixtar called out. We will blockade your worlds. We will sanction your trade. You will regret this arrogance. The 3 humans walked toward the massive doors of the chamber. Their footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet that had fallen. The laughter had stopped. Now there was just confusion and growing anger. You need us, someone shouted from the upper levels. Taman paused at the doorway. He looked back one last time at the council that had called itself civilized while treating humanity as slaves in all but name. He thought of all the humans who had worked so hard to make this partnership succeed. He thought of the engineers and doctors and teachers and diplomats who had given everything to help these species. No, he said quietly. You needed us. You just never realized it. Then he walked out, followed by Jiwoo and Hana. The doors closed behind them with a sound like thunder. Behind them, the chamber erupted into chaos. Species shouted at each other. Drexelon demanded order. Vixtar called for immediate military action, but the humans did not hear any of it. They were already gone, walking down the long corridor that led to the docking bay where their ship waited. None of them looked back. None of them spoke. They had said everything that needed to be said. In the chamber, Drexelon finally restored order. He declared that humanity would return within a month, begging for mercy. The council agreed. They passed sanctions. They authorized blockades. They made plans for humanity's inevitable surrender. But in the quiet of that long corridor, Taman allowed himself a small, sad smile. The council had no idea what was about to happen. They had no idea what they had just lost. And by the time they figured it out, it would be too late. The real message had already been sent to every human in council space. 2 simple words that would change everything. Come home. Sun Ho watched the sunrise over the Krill capital city one last time. The 3 suns of this world painted the sky in shades of purple and gold that Earth had never known. He had spent 8 years here, designing buildings that could withstand the planet's fierce storms and extreme temperatures. The grand tower behind him, the one that would serve as the new seat of Krell government, was his masterpiece. It was beautiful. It was functional. It was finished, and now it was time to leave. He walked back into his office and picked up the data crystal containing all the blueprints, all the calculations, all the little notes he had made about the building's quirks. Every structure had them, little things that only the designer knew. The way the eastern ventilation system needed adjustment every few weeks, the specific angle of the solar panels that maximized efficiency, the backup generator that sometimes needed manual reset. Sun Ho placed the crystal on his desk where his replacement would find it. The Krell had assigned someone yesterday, a young architect named Clixitar who had studied under him. Good kid, smart. But Sun Ho had not had time to teach him everything. There was not enough time now. The message had come 2 days ago. 2 words. Come home. Sun Ho had known immediately what it meant. He had packed his belongings, finalized his work, and booked passage on the next human transport. He did not say goodbye to Clixitar. He did not explain. He simply left behind everything the Krell would need and walked away. Across the galaxy, thousands of humans were doing the same thing. On the Veltorian industrial moon of Hexus Prime, Young Mai powered down the central fusion reactor for the last time under her supervision. She had designed the system 5 years ago, a beautiful network of power generation that supplied energy to 36 cities. It was stable now, running smoothly, producing more power than the Veltorians had ever thought possible from such a small facility. But it needed her. She knew this in her bones. The system required weekly recalibrations that she had never written down, because they depended on feel, on instinct, on understanding how the magnetic fields shifted with the moon's orbital position. She had tried to explain it once to her Veltorian assistant, but he had waved her away. Why write down what the human already knew? Young Mai transferred all the technical documentation to the facility's main computer. Schematics, power curves, maintenance schedules. Everything except the one thing that mattered: how to feel when the system was running wrong. That could not be taught through documents. It had to be learned through experience, through time, through someone patient enough to teach and someone humble enough to learn. The Veltorians had never been humble. She walked to the transport station and boarded the ship without looking back. The reactor would run for another month, maybe 2, before the first problem started. After that, things would get interesting. In the Aquarian Medical Complex on Tide Station, Dr. Bin Na finished her final surgery. The patient was an Aquarian child born with a defective respiratory system. 3 months ago, this would have been fatal. But Bin Na had adapted human surgical techniques to Aquarian physiology, creating procedures that saved lives the Aquarians had thought beyond saving. She had tried to teach these techniques to Aquarian doctors. Some had learned. Many had not bothered, content to call for the human doctor whenever a difficult case arrived. Why learn when the human was always available? Binna cleaned her instruments, updated the patient's file, and submitted her resignation. The hospital director had stared at her in shock. Resign, now? But they needed her! Who would handle the complex cases? Binna had not answered. She had simply walked out, her small bag of personal belongings over her shoulder. Behind her, the hospital's waiting list was full of patients only she knew how to treat. The Aquarian doctors would have to learn quickly, or their patients would die. Simple as that. On the council's central communication hub, Programmer Bin worked through the night, finishing his final task. The hub was the most important data center in council space, routing messages between thousands of worlds, coordinating trade and diplomacy and military operations. Bin had written much of the core code, elegant programs that handled the chaotic flow of information from hundreds of different species, using hundreds of different protocols. The system worked perfectly. As long as someone understood it, Bin had documented everything. Every function was labeled. Every variable was explained. The code was open source, available to anyone who wanted to study it. There was just one small problem: it was all in Korean, and the mathematical notation was human, and the comments referenced Earth literature, human philosophy, cultural concepts that aliens had never bothered to study. Could it be translated? Of course. Would it be easy? Not even a little bit. Bin smiled as he uploaded the final documentation packet. He had done his job. He had left nothing out. If the council wanted to understand the system, all they had to do was learn his language. After all, humans had learned dozens of alien languages. Surely the great Galactic Council could learn one more. He walked to the docking bay where a human transport waited. 50 other humans were already there. Engineers and technicians and programmers who kept the hub running. They all had the same expression on their faces. Not anger, not satisfaction, just a quiet certainty that they were doing the right thing. Within 48 hours, every human merchant vessel in council space had detached from orbital stations. There were thousands of them, small ships and large ones, carrying goods between species who could not stand each other long enough to trade directly. Humans had become the universal middlemen because they got along with everyone. They understood Krell honor and Veltorian pride and Aquarian poetry. They knew when to be formal and when to be casual. They knew how to make deals that satisfied everyone. Without them, trade routes began to collapse. Species who had relied on human translators suddenly could not communicate. Deals fell through. Shipments went to wrong destinations. The careful flow of commerce that had run so smoothly began to sputter and stall. The council noticed, but they were not worried yet. These were just inconveniences, minor disruptions. Everything would settle down once the humans realized their mistake and came back. But the humans did not come back. Messages from council worlds to human space went unanswered. Ambassadors tried to contact Earth, but the communication channels were closed. Some tried to visit human colonies, but they found the borders sealed. Automated defense platforms designed by humans denied all access. The weapons did not fire. They did not need to. They simply said no, in 100 different languages, and would not be moved. On Hexus Prime, Young Mi's fusion reactor ran smoothly for exactly 32 days. Then the first fluctuation appeared. Small at first, barely noticeable. The Veltorian technicians checked the documentation, followed the procedures, and the fluctuation went away. For 3 days, then it came back, stronger this time. The technicians tried everything in the manual. Nothing worked. They sent messages to Young Mi, begging her to return, offering her anything she wanted. The messages bounced back undelivered. Young Mi was gone somewhere in human space, and she was not answering. On the 39th day, the reactor scrammed, shutting down automatically to prevent damage. 36 Veltorian cities went dark. Emergency power lasted 6 hours. Then the riot started. On Tide Station, Dr. Binna's absence was noticed within a week. 3 patients with complex conditions arrived at the hospital, cases that only she had known how to treat. The Aquarian doctors studied her notes, tried to replicate her techniques, failed. 2 of the 3 patients died. The third survived barely after a surgery that took 6 hours instead of the 90 minutes Binna had needed. The hospital director sent increasingly desperate messages to Earth. To any human who might listen, they went unanswered. On the communication hub, programmer Bin's code ran perfectly for almost 2 months. Then the first error appeared. A small glitch in the translation protocol between Krell and crystalline languages. Technicians tried to fix it, but the code was complex, written in Korean, referencing concepts they did not understand. They made it worse. Within a week, 3 more errors appeared. Within a month, entire communication channels were failing. Messages went undelivered. Diplomatic incidents exploded as species misunderstood each other. The technicians brought in linguistic experts to translate Bin's code. It helped, but not enough. The system was degrading faster than they could fix it, and across the galaxy in 1,000 different places the same pattern repeated. Systems failed. Infrastructure crumbled. Projects stalled. The galaxy was discovering slowly and painfully just how much it had depended on humans. In the council chamber, Chancellor Drexelon called emergency sessions every week. Representatives arrived in various states of panic. Their worlds were experiencing problems. Nothing catastrophic yet, but growing. The humans needed to come back. They needed to fix what they had broken. But the humans had not broken anything. They had simply stopped fixing what was already broken, and that Drexelon was beginning to realize was so much worse. Commander Thelax had served on the Rimward defense grid for 20 years. The massive station protected 12 systems from threats beyond the galactic edge, a lonely outpost at the very rim of known space. It was boring work most of the time. The sensors watched empty space. The weapons stayed cold. Day after day, nothing happened, until the day everything stopped working. Thelax stared at his console in disbelief. The main defense grid showed red across every system. Weapons offline, sensors degraded, shield generators failing, power fluctuating wildly. A dozen critical errors that should have been impossible. The station had redundancy built upon redundancy. It was designed to survive almost anything, but it was not designed to survive the loss of Chief Technician Dae-hyun. Thelax pulled up the maintenance logs, his tentacles moving frantically across the controls. The last entry was from Dae-hyun, dated 3 months ago, the day he had left. 8 years of service, and he had just walked away with barely a goodbye. Thelax had thought it strange at the time, but Dae-hyun had seemed sad rather than angry. He had hugged everyone on the crew, wished them well, and left. Now Thelax understood why he had looked so sad. The maintenance logs were detailed. Dae-hyun had documented everything he did, but as Thelax read through them, a cold feeling spread through his body. The entries were full of phrases like intuitive adjustment and field-based calibration, and compensated for harmonic drift. These were not technical terms. These were descriptions of things only Dae-hyun had known how to do. Thelax called his engineering team together. They were good people, skilled technicians all, but none of them had trained under Dae-hyun. None of them understood what he had really done here for 8 years. They had thought he was just maintaining the systems. They had not realized he was holding them together. "Can we fix this?" Thelax asked. The senior engineer, a Krell named Vorinx, shook his head slowly, not without understanding what he was compensating for. The systems are degrading in ways that should not be possible. It is as if he was adjusting for fundamental design flaws that no one documented. "Can we contact him?" We have tried. No response. All messages to human space are being returned undelivered. Telex looked at the tactical display. Beyond the grid, in the deep dark between galaxies, things moved. Pirates, scavengers. Worse things that had no names. The grid had kept them out for decades. Without it, those 12 systems were defenseless. How long until complete failure? He asked quietly. At current rates of degradation? 2 weeks, maybe 3. Thelax sent an emergency message to the Council. 2 of the systems under his protection requested immediate evacuation protocols. 3 million people would need to be moved. The Council approved the request but could not provide enough ships. The human merchant fleet, which could have handled the evacuation easily, was gone. Across the galaxy, similar crises were erupting like flames from a spreading fire. On the agricultural world of Greenfield, the crops were dying, not from disease or drought, but from simple neglect. The world had been transformed 20 years ago by a human agronomist named Yoon Seo, who had studied the soil and climate and created a farming system perfectly adapted to local conditions. The yields had been incredible, feeding dozens of nearby worlds. But Yoon Seo had left 3 months ago, and no one had realized how much she still did. She visited the farms regularly, making tiny adjustments to irrigation schedules and crop rotations. She tested soil samples and adjusted fertilizer mixtures. She watched the weather patterns and anticipated problems before they appeared. The local farmers had thought she was just consulting. They had not understood that she was the only thing standing between success and disaster. Now the crops were failing, and no one knew why. They followed the procedures Yoon Seo had left behind, but the procedures did not work. Because the procedures assumed someone understood the principles behind them, someone who could adapt when conditions changed, someone like Yoon Seo. The Crystalline Consortium faced a different but equally urgent crisis. Their atmosphere processors, which maintained breathable environments on 17 colony worlds, were degrading. The systems had been upgraded 5 years ago by human environmental engineers. Beautiful designs that were 70% more efficient than the old crystalline technology. But now they were failing in cascades. One would go offline, putting strain on the others, causing another to fail. The crystalline engineers tried to compensate, but they did not understand the load-balancing algorithms. The documentation was clear enough, but it assumed knowledge that the crystalline did not have. They tried to reverse engineer the systems. They tried to contact the human engineers who had built them. Nothing worked. 16 hours after the first processor went offline, an entire colony world was evacuated in emergency conditions. 3,000 crystalline died in the panic. The Silicon Collective discovered that their vast computational networks were experiencing cascading errors. The networks were the pride of their civilization, distributed intelligence systems that processed data for half the species in council space. Human programmers had helped optimize them 15 years ago, elegant solutions that increased processing power by a factor of 10. Now those optimizations were unraveling. The errors were subtle at first, small glitches in calculations that no one noticed, but they accumulated. After 3 months, financial systems were reporting incorrect totals. Scientific research was producing flawed results. Navigation systems were miscalculating jump coordinates. The Silicon Collective tried to roll back to their old systems, but they had decommissioned most of them years ago. Why keep inferior technology when the human-improved versions worked so well? Now they were trapped, dependent on systems they did not fully understand, watching them crumble in slow motion. In the council chamber, Chancellor Drexelon faced angry representatives from across the galaxy. Everyone had problems. Everyone needed help. Everyone blamed him for letting the humans leave. "This is intolerable," shouted Representative Vixtar. "The Krell homeworld is experiencing infrastructure failures across all major cities. Our capital, designed by human architects, has environmental systems that no one understands how to maintain. We are facing mandatory evacuations. The Aquarian medical system is in collapse," said the Aquarian delegate. "Mortality rates have increased 40%. Procedures that saved lives 3 months ago are now killing patients because no one truly learned how to perform them." The crystalline representative's voice chimed with distress. "We have lost an entire colony world. 3,000 of our people are dead. The humans must return. They must fix what they have broken." Drexelon wanted to scream at them. The humans had not broken anything. They had simply stopped fixing everything. But he could not say that. To admit it would be to admit that the Council had been wrong, that they had been dependent on a species they had called primitive, that they had been fools. "We will find solutions," he said instead. "We are a galaxy of hundreds of species. Surely we can solve these problems without human help." But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. The problems were not just technical. They were everywhere, woven into the fabric of how the galaxy operated. Humans had not just maintained systems, they had connected systems. They had translated between species who could not stand each other. They had mediated disputes before they became wars. They had taught and learned and adapted in ways that no other species seemed able to match. And now they were gone. And the galaxy was discovering just how much it had taken them for granted. In her quarters on a space station near Earth, Instructor Myung prepared her final lesson. She had taught xenobiology at the Council's premier academy for 12 years, training the next generation of scientists. Her students had come from every species, and she had loved teaching them, watching them grow and learn. She recorded a video message and sent it to her former colleague, a Krell professor named Tixon. In the video, she sat calmly in her chair, her hands folded in her lap, her expression sad but resolute. "Tixon," she said, "I know you are confused about why I left, why all the humans left, so I will explain. We came to you in peace. We shared everything we knew. We asked only for respect and equality. You treated us as primitives, as tools to be used and discarded when convenient. We will no longer participate in our own exploitation. Good luck." The message reached Tixon 3 days later. He watched it alone in his office, and for the first time in his long career, he felt ashamed. He thought of all the times he had dismissed Myung's ideas because she was human, all the times he had taken credit for work she had done, all the times he had treated her as a useful subordinate rather than an equal colleague. He tried to reply, to apologize, to beg her to come back. But the message would not send. The communication systems were failing, unable to route complex transmissions anymore. The irony was not lost on him. He could not even apologize properly because the humans who maintained the communication networks were gone. 6 months after humanity left, the Galactic Council chamber felt empty even though it was full. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the seats, but everyone noticed the vacant section where the human delegation had once sat. That empty space seemed to grow larger every day, a constant reminder of what they had lost. Chancellor Drexelon looked older. His shimmering skin had dulled and his movements lacked their usual confidence. He stood before the council and knew that everything he had built his career on was crumbling. The great Galactic Council, thousands of years old, was falling apart in mere months. "Economic reports," he said, his voice heavy. "Begin." The financial coordinator, a Silicon collective unit designated as Calcin, projected data into the center of the chamber. The numbers hung in the air like an accusation. Trade volume down 63%. 30% of all council commerce had run through human intermediaries. Species who could not communicate directly, who did not trust each other, who had conflicting cultural practices. Humans had bridged all those gaps. Now the gaps were back, wider than ever. The Krell and Aquarians have engaged in 3 armed conflicts over trade disputes in the past month, Calcin reported. Before the human departure, such conflicts were mediated before violence occurred. Human translators understood both cultures well enough to prevent misunderstandings. Now we have no one who can serve that function. "What about the universal translators?" someone asked. "Human-made," Calcin replied. "They are failing. The AI systems require regular updates that only human programmers understood how to implement. We are attempting to reverse engineer them, but the progress is slow." Representative Vixtar stood, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "The Krell military wishes to report on our readiness status." "It is not good news." He activated his own display. Images of massive warships appeared, sleek and deadly, the pride of the Krell fleet. New dreadnoughts designed with human assistance, the most powerful vessels in Council space. "These ships are superior to anything we have ever built," Vixtar said. "Human consultants helped us incorporate technologies we had never considered. But we have discovered something disturbing." He highlighted sections of the ship's control systems. "There are safety features embedded deep in the core programming. Features we cannot disable or modify. The ships are perfectly functional for defense, but any attempt to use them for aggressive military action results in immediate system lockdowns. The chamber erupted in shouting. Aggressive action? What did that mean? Could they not defend themselves? Defensive operations work perfectly, Vicstar continued. But if we attempt to initiate combat, if we enter another species' space with weapons armed, if we target civilian installations, the systems shut down. The weapons become inert. Navigation locks. We become sitting targets. Admiral G1 had done this. The human military liaison who had worked with the Krell fleet for 10 years. She had programmed these safeguards into every ship she touched, and no one had noticed until it was too late. A delayed message from her arrived at Krell High Command that day. It had been set to transmit 6 months after her departure, timed perfectly to arrive just as they discovered what she had done. The message was simple. We helped you build defenses, not tools of conquest. Perhaps consider why you needed to be stopped. The Krell representative sat down heavily. Around the chamber, other species were realizing similar truths. The humans had helped them, yes, but they had also quietly prevented them from using that help for harm. How much of what humanity had built contained similar safeguards? How many systems had hidden restrictions that would only reveal themselves at crucial moments? The Aquarian delegate spoke next, her voice rippling with distress. Our medical crisis deepens. We have lost 17,000 citizens to conditions that would have been easily treatable 6 months ago. Our doctors are learning human techniques, but the learning curve is steep and measured in lives. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was small. We are reviewing our medical school curriculum. We discovered that for the past 20 years, we have been teaching students procedures without teaching them principles. We taught them to follow steps, not to understand why those steps work. Human doctors tried to teach us the deeper knowledge, but we were impatient. We wanted results, not understanding. Now we are paying the price. The Crystalline Consortium representative chimed in, their voice like breaking glass. We have evacuated 3 more colony worlds. Atmosphere processor failures continue to cascade. We have dismantled several units to study them. The human designs are elegant, but they require understanding of thermodynamics and fluid dynamics at levels we have not mastered. Our engineers are learning, but not fast enough. Report after report, species after species, the same story repeated. Crisis, failure, loss, and always the discovery that humans had been doing far more than anyone realized. The Silicon Collective revealed that their cultural renaissance, which they had celebrated as proof of their superiority, had been largely facilitated by humans. Human cultural liaisons had connected Silicon artists with other species, arranged exchanges, translated concepts that should have been untranslatable. Without those bridges, the Silicon culture was stagnating again, falling back into old patterns. We believed we were experiencing natural cultural evolution, the Silicon representative admitted. We did not realize how much we depended on human facilitation. They made it look effortless, so we assumed it was. On and on it went, each species confronting uncomfortable truths. The Veltorian fusion networks remained unstable, their cities experiencing rolling blackouts. The Krell Capitol building had environmental systems that were slowly degrading toward failure. The Aquarian hospitals could not handle complex cases. The agricultural worlds faced potential famine, and through it all the humans remained silent. Messages of apology were sent to human space. Formal requests for negotiation, offers of reparations, new treaties, guarantees of equality. The Council authorized incredible concessions, things they had refused to consider 6 months ago. Everything bounced back undelivered. The humans were not refusing to negotiate. They were simply not acknowledging that the Council existed. Drexelon stood before the Council and made a decision he had never thought he would make. We must reform, he said. Completely. The old charter, which granted founding species greater power, must be dissolved. If humanity returns, it will be as true equals. Not subordinates. Not junior partners, equals, the Veltorian Elder Council protested. They had founded the Galactic Council. They had maintained it for 3,000 years. They could not simply give up their privileged position. Then we will die privileged and alone, Drexelon said flatly. The galaxy is falling apart. Without humans, we are discovering just how much we need each other, and how little we know about working together. Humanity was the glue that held us together, and we never even realized it. The vote was called. The old charter was dissolved by a margin of 73%. A new charter was drafted, one that granted every species equal voice, equal vote, equal respect. It was ratified within a week. Then, and only then, did humanity respond. The message came from Ambassador Taman himself, broadcast to the entire council on every functional channel remaining. He appeared on screens across the galaxy, seated at a simple desk, his expression neutral. "We have received your messages," he said. "We have reviewed your new charter. We are considering your offer. But understand this clearly. Humanity will never again accept less than full equality. We will never again be your tools. We will never again be taken for granted." He paused, letting the words sink in. "If you want humanity's friendship, you must earn it. Not through words, but through actions. Not through promises, but through respect. We will send a new delegation in 1 month. If the council has truly changed, we will discuss terms. If not, we will remain in human space and you will solve your own problems." The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, species looked at each other and realized they had 1 month to prove they had learned something. 1 month to show that they understood what they had lost and why they had lost it. In the empty human delegation section of the council chamber, work crews began preparing. They removed the old seats, the ones in the subordinate area. New seats were being built in the founders section, where species of true importance sat. Humanity had not asked for this. The council had offered it because they finally understood a simple truth. Some species you could do without. Humanity was not one of them. Chancellor Drexelon stood alone in the chamber late that night, looking at the empty space that would soon hold human delegates again. He thought about everything that had happened, everything they had lost, everything they had almost destroyed through arrogance and pride. "We called them primitive," he said to the empty room. "We were the primitives, not in technology but in wisdom." No one answered. But somewhere in human space, Timon received the recording of those words, and for the first time in 6 months he smiled. 1 year after humanity left, Ambassador Sojin walked through the corridors of the Galactic Council Station. She had never been here before, but she knew the stories. This was where Timon had said no, where humanity had walked away, where everything had changed. Behind her walked Chief Engineer Wu Jin and Cultural Liaison Mina. They were the new delegation, carefully chosen. Sojin because she was brilliant but also kind. Wu Jin because he could fix anything but also teach anyone. Mina because she understood that culture was not about rules but about people. They were not the same as the old delegation. They could not be. The galaxy had changed and humanity had changed with it. The council chamber doors opened and Sojin stopped for a moment. The chamber looked the same, vast and beautiful, filled with light and the representatives of hundreds of worlds. But something was different. The human section was no longer in the outer ring where junior members sat. New seats had been built in the founder's circle. Seats of dark wood and soft fabric designed by human craftsmen and approved by the council. Seats of equals. Chancellor Drexelon stood to greet them. He looked older than the recordings had shown, worn down by a year of crisis and change, but his eyes were clear, and when he bowed to Sojin, he bowed as an equal, not as a superior greeting a subordinate. "Ambassador Sojin," he said, "welcome. On behalf of the Galactic Council, we thank you for returning. We have much to discuss." Sojin bowed back. "Chancellor, we are pleased to be here, but let us be clear from the start. Humanity is not returning to the way things were. We are here to build something new, together." Around the chamber, representatives from hundreds of species watched in silence. Some looked relieved. Some looked ashamed. All of them understood that this moment mattered more than any vote or treaty. This was the moment when the galaxy either learned from its mistakes or repeated them. The first session focused on immediate needs. The Veltorian fusion networks were still unstable. Atmosphere processors across the crystalline colonies remained in crisis. The medical systems needed expertise that only humans could provide quickly enough to save lives. Wu Jin stood and addressed the council. "I have reviewed the technical reports from Hexus Prime. The fusion network can be stabilized, but not by me just fixing it. I will return there with a team of Veltorian engineers. We will fix the system together, and I will teach them everything I know about how it works and why it works that way. This will take time. Months, maybe a year. But when we are done, they will not need me anymore." A Veltorian representative stood. "Why would you give us this knowledge?" "We treated you poorly. We dismissed your contributions, Wu Jin smiled sadly, because people are dying in your cities when the power fails. Because my job is not to hoard knowledge but to share it, and because I believe you have learned something from this past year. He paused, looking around the chamber. But understand this. I am not coming back as a tool you can use. I am coming as a teacher. That means you must be willing to learn. Not just the procedures, but the principles. Not just what to do, but why to do it. If you cannot do that, then I cannot help you. The Veltorian representative bowed low. We understand. We will learn. We promise. Mina spoke next about the cultural programs. Human liaisons would return to their posts, but with new mandates. They would not just facilitate exchanges. They would teach species how to facilitate their own exchanges. How to understand each other without human intermediaries. How to build bridges that would last. Culture is not about one group being superior to another, Mina said. It is about recognizing that every group has value, every perspective matters, every voice deserves to be heard. Humans learned this the hard way, over thousands of years of our own mistakes. We can teach you what we learned, but only if you want to learn it. The Aquarian delegate asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Why are you helping us after what we did to you? So Jin stood. Because that is who we are. Humans have a saying. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. You showed us that you saw us as tools. We believed you, we left. But now you have shown us something else, that you can change. That you can learn. That you can admit mistakes and try to be better. We believe that too. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of species. We did not leave because we hate you. We left because we respect ourselves. And now we are returning because we believe you have learned to respect us. If we are wrong, we will leave again. And next time we will not come back. The message was clear. Humanity had choices now. The galaxy needed them more than they needed the galaxy. That power dynamic had shifted completely and everyone understood it. Over the following months, human experts returned to Council space. But everything was different now. Young Mai went back to Hexus Prime, but with 3 Veltorian apprentices. She spent 16 hours a day teaching them about fusion dynamics, about magnetic field variations, about the instincts that came from years of experience. It was exhausting work, harder than just fixing things herself. But she saw the moment when her students understood, really understood how the system worked. That made it worthwhile. Sun Ho returned to the Krell capital with a team of architects, both human and Krell. They reviewed every system in the Great Tower, documenting not just what needed to be done, but why. Sun Ho held weekly classes where he taught the principles of adaptive architecture, how to design buildings that could respond to changing conditions. His Krell students were brilliant, and they soaked up knowledge like sponges. He realized they had always been capable of learning this. They had just never been taught. Dr. Bin Na went back to Tide Station, but she refused to perform surgeries alone anymore. Every procedure became a teaching moment. She made Aquarian doctors scrub in with her, made them understand the theory behind every cut, every suture, every decision. Some of them resented it at first. They wanted her to just fix the patients. But gradually they understood. She was not there to be their tool. She was there to make them better doctors. Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated. Humans returned, but as teachers, not servants. As partners, not subordinates. As equals who shared knowledge freely but expected respect in return. The changes went beyond just technical knowledge. The council itself transformed. The new charter was more than words on paper. It was implemented with genuine commitment. Every species now had equal voting rights. Decisions required consensus, not just majority rule from the founding species. Humans participated in debates as equals, and their voices carried weight. But more importantly, other species began to learn what humans had always known, that cooperation meant more than just working together. It meant understanding each other, respecting differences, building relationships based on mutual benefit rather than exploitation. The Krell and Aquarians, who had been on the verge of war 6 months ago, established a cultural exchange program. With Mina's help, they learned to appreciate each other's artistic traditions. The conflicts did not disappear, but they learned to resolve them through dialogue rather than violence. The Crystalline Consortium and Silicon Collective began collaborative research projects, combining their unique abilities in ways that neither could achieve alone. Human scientists facilitated the initial connections, but soon the two species were working together independently. The Veltorians, perhaps most dramatically, transformed their entire education system. Drexelon himself attended Wu Jin's lectures on engineering principles, sitting in the back row with students a fraction of his age. He learned. He asked questions. He admitted when he did not understand something. And in doing so, he showed his entire species that there was no shame in learning from others. 1 year after the return, Sojin stood in the council chamber for a ceremonial session. It was the anniversary of Taimin's departure, and the council had voted to make it a day of remembrance. Not a celebration, but a reminder. Drexelon spoke to the assembled delegates. 1 year ago, we drove humanity away through our arrogance and prejudice. We believed we were superior, that we were the civilized core of the galaxy. We were wrong. We were the primitives, not in technology but in wisdom. We built an empire on the backs of those we considered inferior. And we learned painfully that we were the ones who were lacking. He looked directly at Sojin. Humanity showed us something we should have known all along. That strength is not about domination, but about cooperation. That wisdom is not about knowing everything, but about being willing to learn. That civilization is not about power, but about respect. Sojin stood and walked to the center of the chamber. She looked at the seat she had occupied this past year. The seat in the founder's circle that humanity had earned not through force or threats, but through the simple act of walking away when disrespected. A year ago, my predecessor stood in this chamber and said no, Sojin said. It was the hardest decision humanity has ever made. We walked away from species we cared about, from projects we had invested in, from relationships we had built. We did it because we had to, because sometimes the most powerful statement is not a shout but silence. Sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to walk away. She paused, looking around the chamber. But we came back. Not because we needed you, but because we believed you could change. And you did. You are Chang.